Welcome back. The funeral service of the former Prime Minister of Kenya is currently underway in Bondo, Kisimu County. Now, Odinga died on Wednesday last week. For more on this now, we speak to international news correspondent Sophie Mukwena, who joins us now on the latest on this. Good morning, Sophie. So, Raila Odinga was not just a political leader, but a symbol of Kenya's democratic struggle. Just how is the political establishment responding to this particular moment of saying goodbye, and who's attending the funeral?
Well, you are correct. Raila Odinga's history in the politics of Kenya is quite rich in terms of being a strong opposition in that country, but also contributing towards building a multi-party democracy in that country. He continued to contest elections 5 times, trying to contest the presidency or the presidential elections, but unfortunately he was not able to win those elections, but had a very powerful influence, particularly with the grassroots and also with young people in that country. And therefore, we saw him particularly during the last election, where he had a strong support of the youth also. However, during the protest where the Gen Z generation were fighting a decision by the Kenyan authority to impose some levy or tax, he was not so vocal at that time, which led to many challenges, and we saw the abduction of young people and some of them dying. And at that time, he was contesting the chairpersonship of the AU Commission, and he was supported by the government of Kenya. And I think at that moment, his interests were conflicted, and he took a more reconciliatory tone, which angered the very strong support base that he had. But later, after not being able to win that contest, he continued to be the voice of reason in Kenya, but we also saw a situation where he worked with William Ruto to try and stabilize Kenya. In terms of people who are there, we saw the current president, William Ruto, who delivered eulogy on Friday during the state funeral. We also saw the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and of course the former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, who was his friend. And you know, as you touch on that as well, Sophie, there's been much talk about what Odinga's death means rather for the future of opposition, because you touched on that just at the start of our chat, you know, and you spoke of his influence as well as mobilizing the youth as well. So talk now goes back to what his death means for the future of opposition politics in Kenya, and just what role has Odinga played in shaping those politics, because I know you also touched on some of that just at the start of the chat. You are correct, because his organization, ODM, has been going through challenges, the divisions, because there are those who are supporting the Gen Z movement, and there are those who are saying in the interest of the country, we also have to work with the current government. And therefore, it is going to be a challenging road ahead in terms of ODM continuing to be a force to be reckoned with ahead of the elections in that country. The issue is who will be able to fit properly in terms of leadership style of Raila Odinga within ODM, being able to balance the interest of the country, but also still being a strong voice against wrongdoing. That is the main challenge that ODM is going to face. But also the young people, will they continue to rally behind ODM? Because we know with young people, it becomes politics of individuals or personality cults, and therefore you need a person who will resonate with the young people and be able to win their hearts and minds. Now, when you look within ODM, you ask yourself, who is that person who will be able to do that? But also taking into consideration that if a country regrets, it becomes a problem to rebuild.
And here's the thing, just beyond politics as well, he was known for his philanthropy as well, Sophie, and his push for national reconciliation. Just how is this side of his legacy being remembered at this stage?
That's what people were talking about on Friday during the state funeral, including the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta. You know that last elections, there was tension between President Uhuru Kenyatta and his successor, William Ruto, who at some point in time, they were working together, William Ruto being the vice or the deputy president of that country. But during that funeral, you could see that synergy and unity because he was able to break that ice. Because the last elections, when there was a fallout between Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, Raila Odinga was more on the side of Uhuru Kenyatta. But later, they worked together with William Ruto in his twilight years. And therefore, he was able to be a glue on Friday. And even today, as we can see during the funeral. And that's what he's been credited for in terms of trying to build a better Kenya. And the wife of Raila Odinga has emphasized that the principle he stood for must continue, particularly on issues of fighting corruption in that country and poor governance. And I think now the question is who will take this battle forward?
And that's an interesting question, you know, Sophie, because that leads me straight to the final question that I'm going to ask you, that as the nation now there prepares to say their final goodbyes, now the question then automatically moves to what happens next? What happens next for his family? What happens next to the movement that he worked so hard to build?
Currently, his party has appointed an interim leader. We don't know whether there is going to be a conference to elect a new leader who will then take over the work of Raila Odinga, both in the party as a philanthropy and also a leader within giving direction in the country as he was working with government to try and stabilize and build a better Kenya. The issue is that person, does he have those qualities of Raila Odinga to pull all these things together, as Raila Odinga was able to do, but not only in relation to the national politics, but also continental politics and the global politics. One, for example, he was the AU envoy on infrastructure at some point in time, and we saw him crisscrossing the continent. He even visited South Africa in 2023. I had that exclusive interview with him about the vision of the continent on infrastructure, particularly electricity, as you will be speaking, or you'll see that press conference of the Minister of Electricity later on. His dream, I remember using South Africa as an example, that you can't have the largest economy as South Africa struggling with power and electricity, because it will lead to poor economic development of the powerful country that is an anchor to the economy of the continent. And therefore, this is the type of work he did. And the question is, will you have that kind of a leader? We see Uhuru Kenyatta right now doing a lot of work on peace and security on the continent, but Raila was also strong in terms of contributing towards building a better continent.
Right, for SABC News there, that's our international news correspondent, Sophie Mokoena, joining us there for the latest. Thanks so much indeed.